The day my name vanished from the will, I realized blood means nothing. I still remember the silence in that lawyer's office, heavy, suffocating, like the moment before a storm breaks. Everyone else seemed so calm. My grandmother sipping her tea, my brother pretending not to meet my eyes, my parents whispering excuses.
And me?
I just sat there, holding the papers that erased me, as if I never existed in this family. I'd grown up believing respect was our family's greatest treasure. Every birthday, every holiday, they reminded us that family comes first. But that day, I saw what they really meant. Family comes first, as long as you fit their idea of it.
My grandmother's voice still echoes in my head.
It's better this way, Emily. You'll understand someday.
No anger. No regret.
Just calm cruelty. I smiled back, but inside, something shattered quietly, something I could never glue back together. That was the moment I promised myself one thing: I will find out why they erased me, and make them remember my name. When people saw the Hart family from the outside, they saw perfection, a legacy of grace, tradition, and success.
Sunday lunches were our sacred ritual.
Grandfather Robert sat at the head of the table, his silver hair perfectly combed, his presence commanding quiet respect. Grandmother Margaret floated beside him, every gesture controlled, every smile rehearsed. My parents, Linda and James, always sat 2 seats down, careful, polite, and obedient, as if living under my grandparents' roof meant living under their rules.
And then there was Daniel, my older brother, the golden one, the heir.
Every time he spoke, my grandparents' eyes lit up as if his words were gospel. Daniel will take care of this family one day, Grandfather would say, his voice heavy with pride. He has the Hart blood, strong, decisive, worthy. I'd laugh along, pretending not to notice that my name was never mentioned in those conversations.
I told myself it didn't matter.
I wasn't after inheritance or attention. I just wanted to belong, to be seen. Whenever I brought good news, a scholarship, a promotion, a published article, Grandmother would smile politely and say, "That's nice, dear. Daniel just bought a new car, did you see?" And just like that, my achievements would dissolve into the background noise of their admiration for him.
Still, I tried.
I hosted dinners, remembered birthdays, even helped Grandmother organize her charity events. Every time I looked for approval, she would simply nod, her smile never reaching her eyes.
But the more I tried to fit in, the more invisible I became.
One evening, after a family gathering, I overheard Grandfather talking to my father in the study.
His voice was low but firm.
"She's a good girl," my father said softly.
"She's emotional," Grandfather replied.
"Too soft for leadership. Daniel understands our legacy. Emily, she just doesn't have it."
I stood frozen by the door. I didn't cry. I didn't make a sound.
I just walked away, quietly, with the same grace my grandmother had taught me to keep, even when humiliated. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying those words. She doesn't have it.
What was it? The pride?
The arrogance? The ability to pretend love came before power? At breakfast the next morning, everything was the same: laughter, chatter, the smell of fresh coffee.
But I noticed something different.
My grandparents were whispering with Daniel, papers spread across the table. When I walked in, they stopped. Grandmother folded the papers quickly and smiled.
"Good morning, dear.
Sleep well?" I nodded, pretending not to notice how she tucked those papers under her arm before leaving the room. For a family that preached transparency, we sure hid a lot of secrets behind polite smiles. And for the first time in my life, I felt it, a quiet warning inside me. Something was being decided about my future, and I wasn't meant to know what it was. The first sign of trouble came wrapped in expensive paper and fake smiles. Grandmother's 75th birthday was supposed to be a celebration of family legacy. The entire house shimmered with gold and white, portraits of our ancestors lining the hallway, each face reminding us of who we were expected to become. Daniel stood by the piano, entertaining the guests, while I managed the decorations and serving staff. It was always like that. He performed, I prepared. When Grandfather raised his glass to give a toast, I stood beside my mother, waiting for his usual words of wisdom. But this time, his speech was different. "Tonight," he said proudly, "I want to announce that I've finalized the new inheritance structure. Daniel will carry the Hart name into the next generation, with full authority over the estate and properties."
The room burst into applause.
My mother clapped weakly. My father looked proud.
And me? I just stood there, frozen. Not once did he mention my name. I told myself it was just symbolic.
Maybe the real documents were different.
Maybe it didn't mean what it sounded like.
But when the guests left, and the house went quiet, I couldn't keep pretending. I found my grandmother in her sitting room, counting jewelry pieces for her heritage collection. "Grandma," I said softly, "you didn't mention me in the inheritance toast."
She didn't look up.
"Oh, Emily, it's just formality. Daniel will handle things, but of course, your family. So why didn't anyone tell me there was a new will?" Her tone turned cold. "You shouldn't concern yourself with these matters. You have your career, your fiancé. Isn't that enough?"
That sentence sliced deeper than she knew.
"It's not about money," I said, my voice trembling. "It's about respect."
She finally looked up, eyes sharp, voice smooth as glass. "Then earn it."
"The family respects strength, not sensitivity."
I left the room before she could see me cry. In the following days, I noticed changes.
My access to family accounts was quietly removed. The charity fund I managed was transferred to Daniel. Even the family lawyer began to ignore my calls. When I confronted my parents, my father sighed. "Emily, please don't make this difficult. Your grandparents have their reasons." "What reasons?"
I demanded. He couldn't meet my eyes. "Just let Daniel handle things.
You'll be taken care of." Taken care of, as if I was some outsider begging for scraps of affection. Later that week, while cleaning out an old drawer in my mother's study, I found a sealed envelope from our lawyer addressed to my grandparents. My stomach tightened as I read the first line. Subject: final confirmation of name removal, Emily Hart.
I felt my pulse in my throat. My name. My identity. Erased like a mistake.
That evening, I burst into the dining room during dinner. "Did you all really think I wouldn't find out?"
I said, holding the letter up. My grandmother didn't flinch.
"Watch your tone, Emily." "Watch my tone."
I laughed bitterly.
"You've erased me from this family."
Daniel stood up, smug.
"Maybe that's for the best. You never understood what being a Hart means." I looked at him, at all of them, the people I had spent my whole life trying to please, and I felt something inside me shift. The room went silent as I whispered, "If I'm no longer a Hart, then I'm finally free to tell the truth about what this family really is." And in that moment, for the first time, they looked afraid. After that night, nothing in the house felt the same. The walls that once echoed with polite laughter now carried whispers that stopped the moment I entered a room. It started with little things. My name quietly disappeared from the family group chat. I was left out of meetings about the family's foundation, the one I helped build. My grandmother began introducing Daniel as her only grandchild at charity events, a mistake she never corrected. At first, I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it was her age, maybe she just slipped. But then came the evening that shattered any illusion of misunderstanding. It was our annual Hart Heritage Gala, a night meant to honor the family's history. I'd helped organize it for years, the decorations, the speeches, the guest list. But when I arrived that evening, my name wasn't on the program. Daniel was listed as the sole coordinator. I found him by the bar, laughing with a group of investors. "Daniel," I said quietly, "why did you remove my name?"
He smirked.
"Because you're not officially part of the inheritance now."
"It wouldn't look right."
"Wouldn't look right."
My voice shook. "I did all the work." He leaned closer.
"Then next time, do it for the family, not for credit."
The words burned. For the first time, I felt anger rising above the pain. When the speeches began, Grandfather took the stage.
"Tonight," he said proudly, "we celebrate the strength of the Hart legacy built by generations of strong men."
Strong men. My heart pounded.
I looked around. My name wasn't on the banners, not even in the slideshow. It was as if I had never existed in this family's story. People clapped. I stood frozen, every applause sounding like a nail sealing my silence. After the event, I tried to leave quietly, but Grandmother stopped me near the exit. "Emily," she said softly, "don't sulk. These things are not personal." "Not personal," I whispered. "You've erased me from my own bloodline." She sighed, eyes sharp beneath her calm expression. "You've always been too emotional. It's embarrassing sometimes."
Something inside me broke then. I didn't reply.
I just walked out, into the cold night, where the sound of applause faded into the distance. From that night on, my patience began to rot into silence, and silence turned into anger.
I stopped attending dinners. I ignored Daniel's calls. But my grandmother didn't like being ignored.
One afternoon, she arrived unannounced at my apartment. She walked through my living room, inspecting every corner as if searching for weakness. "You're distancing yourself, Emily," she said. "That's not wise."
I crossed my arms.
"Maybe it's time I stopped pretending." Her lips curled into a faint smile. "Pretending? My day, everything you have, your education, your name, it all came from this family. Don't forget who made you." That was when I saw it, the faintest flicker of fear in her eyes, as if she knew I was starting to see through her control. After she left, I sat alone, shaking with anger and clarity. I realized that every act of love had been a transaction, obedience for belonging. That night, I searched through my late grandfather's old desk, one my father had sent to me months ago. Inside, beneath dusty ledgers and business files, I found a sealed brown envelope. On the front, written in his bold handwriting, were the words, "Private, Emily Hart." My hands trembled as I held it. For the first time, I felt it, the truth was close. And whatever was inside that envelope, it was about to change everything. When I finally opened that envelope, I didn't expect the truth to bleed like that, cold, cruel, and permanent. Inside were three things: a letter in my grandfather's handwriting, a set of old photographs, and a birth certificate, mine. Only, it didn't carry the name Hart. My real last name was different, one I had never heard before. For a long moment, the world around me went still. My heart thudded against the silence as I read the letter again and again, each word cutting deeper than the last. "Emily, if you're reading this, it means the truth could not stay buried. Your mother made her choice years ago. You were adopted to protect our family's image. I wanted to keep you, but your grandmother insisted that blood defines legacy. Forgive me." Protect our image. The same words they'd used for every cruel thing they'd ever done. I called my mother that night, my hands shaking. "Mom," I whispered, "is it true?" There was a long pause, then a quiet sob. "I didn't want you to find out this way," she said. "Yes, it's true. You were my sister's child. She ran away, and when she died, your grandparents didn't want the shame. I took you in. I raised you as mine." I felt the floor fall away beneath me. "So I'm not even part of this family?" "You are to me," she cried. "But not to them." I hung up, unable to breathe. For 27 years, I had lived a lie, serving a family that had never truly accepted me. Every smile, every compliment, every "we're so proud of you" had been part of a mask. The next day, I drove to the family estate. I didn't call first. I walked straight into the dining room where they sat as if nothing had happened. Grandmother, grandfather, Daniel, my parents. The family portrait of perfection. I placed the letter on the table. "You hid this from me," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. Margaret looked at the papers and sighed, almost bored. "You shouldn't have gone through his things." "So it's true?" I asked. "You erased me because I wasn't your blood." Robert didn't even flinch. "It wasn't personal, Emily. The inheritance belongs to the Hart line. You wouldn't understand." I laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "You're right. I don't understand cruelty disguised as tradition." Daniel leaned back in his chair, smirking. "It's better this way. You were never really one of us." "Daniel," my mother snapped. But my grandmother raised a hand. "No, he's right." It's time she stopped pretending. Her calmness was worse than any shouting could have been. I looked at each of them, waiting for someone, anyone, to defend me. My father looked away. My mother's eyes were red, but she said nothing. That silence hurt more than the truth itself. I picked up the letter and whispered, "All these years I worked to earn your respect. I thought I failed you. But it was never about failure, it was about blood." Margaret's lips tightened. "You should be grateful we gave you a name at all." That sentence broke something in me. The tears I'd been holding back finally fell, but they weren't weak. They were fire, the kind that burns quietly before it consumes everything. I walked out of that house with nothing, no inheritance, no name, no family. But the farther I drove, the lighter I felt. Because the truth, however cruel, had finally set me free from their control. 4 days, I stayed in my apartment, the world outside moving without me. I didn't eat, didn't answer calls. I watched the rain hit the window and wondered if they even noticed I was gone. Maybe they felt relief. Maybe they were already rewriting history again, cutting my face from the family albums, pretending I'd never existed. But somewhere between grief and rage, something began to change inside me. The humiliation, the betrayal, they no longer broke me. They fueled me. Every cruel word, every act of erasure, every lie, I collected them, piece by piece, like evidence. Because I knew one thing now, the truth they buried could destroy them, just like they destroyed me. I thought about my grandfather's letter, his guilt written between every line. He had wanted to protect me. But he also left me a weapon, proof. Proof of their lies, their hypocrisy, their crimes against their own blood. That night, I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were swollen, my face pale, but something new had settled there, a calm I hadn't felt before. I may not be a heart, I whispered to my reflection, but I'll make sure the world knows what kind of people they really are. It wasn't anger that drove me anymore. It was justice, cold, quiet, and certain. And in that moment, as I folded the letter and placed it back into the envelope, I made a silent promise. They took away my name, but I will make sure the truth carries it further than they ever could. After the first week of shock, the fog cleared. Grief had done its work, stripped me down, left me exposed, and something hard and cold took its place. It wasn't hatred, exactly. It was a steady, focused thing that refused to be numb. I stopped waiting for apologies that would never come and started gathering what I needed: truth, witnesses, a plan. I began with the papers. The letter from my grandfather was the key, his handwriting, his confession, the dates. If he'd left a trail, I would follow it. I called the lawyer who had addressed the envelope and asked questions she pretended not to remember. I went through every file I had access to: old wills, charity records, guest lists from decades of family events. I copied, scanned, digitized. I made backups in 3 places because I'd learned the hard way they love to erase things. Then I confronted my own weakness, doubt. I paid for a DNA test and, yes, I trembled when the results came back. They confirmed what my grandfather's letter said. I wasn't blood, but the tests also showed connections that proved my mother's story. There had been a hidden branch of the family, a scandal buried to protect a name. That scandal was the reason I'd been erased. I found an ally in Ethan. He didn't ask for permission to help, he just showed up with a camera and a calm face. "You don't have to shout your truth," he said quietly. "You just have to prove it." We planned a video that would be more than accusations: letters, dates, photographs, testimony from my mother, and the lawyer's own file headers. It would be factual, surgical, impossible to dismiss as spite. I also hired a small, discreet law firm that specialized in contested wills and elder abuse. The attorney warned me that court could drag me into the family's mud and that some things could be settled quietly for less damage. I told her I wanted exposure, not secrecy. "You want them to feel the shame they caused you," she said, "and you want the world to judge it." She nodded when I said I was ready to risk my reputation too. It was a gamble, but one I'd already paid for with everything that mattered. Emotionally, I rehearsed how I would present myself. I practiced calm. I practiced the hurt in my voice, so it would sound like truth and not theater. I wrote a short statement, clear, controlled, refusing to beg. I collected the photographs, the receipts, the charity ledgers that showed funds redirected to Daniel. I printed copies of the lawyer's memo that confirmed my removal. Every piece fit together like a map. Still, doubt lived in the quiet hours. What if I was wrong? What if exposing them destroyed me as well? What if my mother's pain was exploited in public? The uncertainty made the plan sharp. It had to be correct, or it would become my own undoing. The plan itself had 3 parts: legal contest, public exposure, and reclaiming my identity. The legal contest would freeze assets long enough to force questions. The public exposure, the video played at the family's own gathering, would strip their rehearsed smiles and demand accountability. And reclaiming my identity would mean taking my name back on my terms, not theirs. Ethan set up the camera. The lawyer finalized the first filings, and I slid the grandfather's letter back into its envelope, sealing it like proof waiting to be opened at the right moment. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the stack of papers in front of me and felt something I hadn't in months:
quiet power. I wasn't the same broken girl who had begged for belonging. I was someone who had been erased and chose to write herself back into the story. I whispered to the empty room, "This is for every time they told me to be quiet." Outside, my phone buzzed, a text from Ethan. "Are you ready?" I stared at the screen, at the papers, at the letter, and then at my reflection in the dark window. The door to the dining room, the place where they celebrated themselves, felt closer than it had in years. I stood up, folded the documents, and walked toward a decision that would either free me or destroy me, and pulled the front door closed behind me. The dining hall shimmered under the crystal chandelier, a cruel imitation of peace. It was Daniel's celebration dinner, the night he'd officially take control of the estate, the business, the name. Every relative was there, their laughter echoing through marble walls like ghosts of hypocrisy. I stood outside the double doors for a moment, hearing it all, the same voices that once told me to stay silent, to be grateful for crumbs. Then Ethan's message flashed on my phone, "Now." I walked in. The chatter dipped, then fell into an uneasy hush. Dozens of eyes turned, their smiles freezing like painted masks. My stepmother, Miranda, blinked as if she'd seen a ghost. Daniel's smirk faltered for just a second. "Well," Miranda said, her tone sharp with fake warmth, "I didn't realize you were invited." I smiled, calm, controlled. "Don't worry. I brought my own invitation." Ethan, standing discreetly by the projector, nodded. The lights dimmed. At first, they thought it was part of the evening, some slideshow about Daniel's achievements. But when my grandfather's handwriting appeared on the screen, followed by his voice, trembling from an old recording, the air fractured. "If you're hearing this, it means I failed to fix what I broke. The truth must not die with me. The one you cast out, she is my blood in spirit, if not in name." I wronged her mother. I wronged them both. A gasp cut through the room. My stepmother's hand froze on her glass. Daniel's jaw tensed. The recording continued, laying bare the affair, the concealed child, the guilt, every secret they had spent years burying beneath luxury and lies. Miranda rose abruptly. "Turn that off," she barked. Ethan didn't move. The footage shifted, scanned letters, dates, the signed confession. Then, my mother's photograph filled the screen, young, radiant, and broken-hearted. My voiceover followed, steady and cold. "4 years, I begged to be seen. 4 years, you called me a mistake. But mistakes don't carry proof, and proof doesn't lie." I could feel the silence stretching, cracking like ice underfoot. Daniel slammed his hand against the table. "This is pathetic. You're doing all this for attention." "No," I said, stepping closer. "I'm doing this because you stole what wasn't yours. Because she," I pointed at Miranda, "lied to protect her greed, and you enjoyed every piece of it." "You don't belong here," she hissed. "And yet," I said softly, "I'm the only one who belongs to the truth." A murmur rippled across the relatives. Some looked at me with pity. Others, with shame. My uncle, the one who'd always stayed neutral, finally spoke. "Miranda, is this true?" Her face drained of color. That old man was senile. He didn't know what he was saying. Ethan clicked play again. My grandfather's signature appeared beside a dated legal memo. Then came the final words of the recording, trembling but clear. "If you love justice, give her what's hers. My conscience rests only when she stands free." The silence that followed was unbearable, and perfect. Daniel stood, red-faced. "Enough of this drama. She's nothing. Just a bastard with a camera." My hand slapped the envelope onto the table before he finished. Inside were the DNA results, the lawyer's memos, and the notarized letters. "You wanted proof? There it is. Every lie, every manipulation, every signature you forged under her instructions." The lawyer who handled the estate stood slowly. "These documents are valid," she said, her voice grave. "If authentic, this changes everything." The color drained from Daniel's face. Miranda whispered something to him, but he shoved her hand away. For the first time, he looked afraid. I turned toward the gathered family, every pair of eyes that had once looked through me. "You taught me that blood is everything. But I've learned that truth runs deeper. You can erase names from papers, but not from history." I stepped back as the lights flickered on. The hall was no longer filled with laughter, only whispers, guilt,
and shattered pride.
Miranda slumped into her chair.
Daniel stared at the documents like they were ghosts come to collect a debt. I took a slow breath and said the line that had lived inside me since the day they broke me. You buried me alive in silence, and still, I found my voice. No one stopped me as I turned and walked toward the exit. Behind me, chaos erupted, voices arguing, glasses breaking, reputations unraveling. Outside, the night was cool and mercifully quiet. Ethan followed, camera still in hand. You did it, he whispered. I looked back once, just long enough to see the lights of the mansion flicker like dying stars. Not yet, I said. That was just the truth. Justice comes next. And with that, I walked into the dark, finally, on my own terms. Silence, that was all that remained after the storm. The same hall that once echoed with laughter, judgment, and applause now stood still, hollow, and stripped of pretense. In that silence, I found something I had searched for my entire life: peace. The next morning, the world looked different. The sky was washed clean after the night's chaos, soft light spilling over the garden I had planted as a child but was never allowed to tend. I walked through it now, barefoot, letting the dew kiss my feet like an old friend. Inside the mansion, everything was unraveling. Daniel had locked himself in his room, his name plastered across the morning news for fraudulent inheritance practices. Miranda's allies were vanishing. The very people who once admired her elegance now whispered her name like a curse. And my father, he sat in the library, silent, eyes fixed on the family portrait that no longer told the truth. I didn't feel triumph, only release. Ethan stood beside me as the lawyers packed boxes of evidence. You could stay, he said softly. The estate will be yours now. I smiled faintly. This house was never a home. It's just a museum of broken promises. He nodded, understanding without another word. Before I left, I walked through every room one last time. The dining hall where I'd once been ignored, the study where I'd overheard my grandfather dismiss me, the balcony where I'd stood alone watching fireworks for other people's celebrations. Each corner still carried ghosts of silence, but they no longer frightened me. When I reached the front door, I found my father waiting there. He looked older, smaller somehow, as if the truth had stolen his posture along with his pride. I should have stood by you, he said, voice cracking. I let them turn my love into cowardice. For a moment, I almost reached for him, but then I remembered every time he'd chosen comfort over courage. I don't hate you, I said quietly, but I can't carry your guilt anymore. His eyes welled up. Where will you go? Anywhere the truth isn't a threat. And with that, I stepped out, light, unburdened, whole. Months passed. The investigation into Daniel and Miranda continued, their empire crumbling piece by piece. I never watched the coverage, but sometimes I'd receive a message from Ethan, short updates, always ending with the same line. Justice is slow, but it's coming. I built a small life of my own. Nothing grand, but real, teaching literature in a quiet coastal town, surrounded by students who listened because they wanted to, not because they had to. Every time I stood before them, I spoke of stories, of truth, of courage, of how dignity isn't inherited, it's earned. One afternoon, a student asked me, "Do you believe people can really change?" I smiled, looking out the window where sunlight danced across the ocean. Some do, I said, but most only learn what they lost when it's too late. There was a time I thought revenge would heal me, but it wasn't revenge that saved me, it was letting go. Justice gave me peace, but self-worth gave me freedom. And so, if there's one truth I've learned, it's this. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply walking away, and letting silence speak for you. The Hart estate remains in legal limbo to this day. Maybe it always will. But that doesn't matter anymore. Because I no longer need a name to define me. I became the legacy they tried to erase, not through blood, but through truth. And in that truth, I finally found home.